This Ferrari is missing one vital component. But even still, without the vital component, it cost me £60,000, which may sound expensive, but that's for a reason. This car comes with a gated manual gearbox. And according to Google, of the 15,000 F430s that were made, only 1,500 of them were manual, making this car pretty rare and expensive. This could turn out to be a pretty good bargain, providing we can get this engine back together. The engine that I got with this car came in a million pieces, as 11 years ago it was taken apart to fix something but never got put back together. But my good friend Tavares donated me a spare engine, but with one problem. And that is what happens when you try and compress a fluid. So me and my dad have been attempting to rebuild the engine, but there was an issue. We couldn't get any information or torque specs from Ferrari. They won't give you them. But that was until today. We think we have a breakthrough. Thanks to you guys, I've managed to get my hands on a workshop manual, but it is for a Maserati. But this Maserati engine is also used in the 430 because the Italians like to share, and later in the video we find that the French also like to share with the Italians as well. The cylinders are now ready for the pistons, but before we do that we need to change the piston rings. There's 3 of them on this piston. The lower piston ring is called the oil ring, which stops oil getting into the combustion chamber, and then the top 2 piston rings are used for compression, to keep a nice tight seal in the combustion chamber. And if those were worn out, then you'd lose a lot of power and you'd definitely be burning a lot of oil. First, my dad's using an old piston ring to clean up the recesses of where the new piston rings will go. Then before we fit the ring into the piston, we're going to slide the ring in the cylinder. Now you'll notice a little gap in the piston ring. This is called piston ring gap. And this has to be a specific size. If the gap is too big, as I mentioned, you'll burn a lot of oil and we won't have the right compression. But if the gap is too small, then when the engine heats up, the piston ring will expand and it will have nowhere to go but to score up the inside of the cylinder sleeve. Our piston ring gap is all good, so now we're loading up the piston rings into the piston. And now that they're in the piston, we can begin to put them finally in the cylinders. This special bit of kit squashes the rings into the piston, and then we can knock the piston into the cylinder. And we've just got to do that 7 more times. Oh, it's well heavier now.
I told you it's heavy. Your old dad.
We're moving, and now it's time for the bottom end bearings. The funny thing about these bottom end bearings is that they make different ones depending on the engine, and they've all got different sizes, different tolerances. The only thing we could do is look at the part number on the old ones and match them up, easy as that, but fairly simple to go in. The big end bearings slide in at the bottom of the conrod. Wow, wow, wow. And once they're in the bottom of the conrod, it's time for the main bearings. These bearings are what the crankshaft rotates on. We have an issue and we don't think it can be solved. So if the engine goes bang and it's because of this reason, it's not our fault. Okay, so check out these bearings here, the main bearings. They slide from left to right, which doesn't look right because then it's covering over the sort of oil gallery there. Like if that covers over, then the oil is not going to get through onto there. But on the old bearings, which you can see here, they've got a tab on the top here, big one, to stop it from sliding left to right. But on the new ones, they've got only a small tab compared to the old bearings. So this is going to be a little bit more serious than we first thought, and confusing. If you go on the website here, you can see that the bearing that we're after is 195307, which is also used in the Maserati engines. But if you click on the Maserati one, the part number has now superseded, so it's changed to 286832, which is the bearing that we've got. But if you click on the Ferrari one, there's no supersession to that part number. The part number has stayed the same, which in our heads doesn't make any sense, because why would they change it for one engine and not the other when the engines are exactly the same? Well, they might be exactly the same in my opinion. Now, we didn't want to run the risk of ruining the engine because one of these bearings has slid over and covered an oil gallery. So instead, we went back and ordered the original part number from Ferrari with the bigger tab on it. We have got, well, I've ordered the correct part number from Marinello Parts. It's come next day. Yeah. And it's got the big tab on. We're going to put these in. I don't know why Maserati have superseded their one, but we're going to ignore that. And we're going to put these in. At least now we can have some peace of mind that we're putting in the same part number as what came out of the engine. And once they were in, it's time for the crankshaft to go in.
What are you doing now, Tony?
There we are. I don't know.
And it's back onto the other half of the big end bearings, which slide into the conrod cap. And then the conrod cap meets the rest of the conrod with some new bolts going in there, making sure to match the numbers on the conrod cap to the conrod.
Is it beeping yet?
Can you not hear that, really?
Oh, I can't hear it.
I'm in charge of torquing everything up because my dad can't hear the beep of the torque wrench. And the conrod bolts have a torque setting and then an angle you have to turn them to.
Oh, yeah, I could use that one.
Did you hear that? And once I've torqued all the conrod bolts up, it's time to prep the crankcase so the other half of it can join together. It says in the manual to run a bead of flange sealant across the crankcasing before it meets, so that's exactly what we're doing. And with the main bearings installed on the other half of the crankcase, we can now slide it together. That's why we needed the manual, because even these washers are machined on one side, so they have one way of going on, and we just whacked them all on. So I'm going to put it all on now the right way. All of these stages are super vital. One mistake here could mean the whole engine would have to come back out again and stripped completely apart. I'm adding all new seals into the oil pump and the water pump, which is built as one, and it's now joined back together. It's all together, it's looking good. We've got a new rear main seal to go in, which my dad's about to put in. Go on. Yeah. No. And whilst my dad is putting that in, he has never tried a Y food. Now, we're gonna get him to choose from the fruity range. Mango, peach, or
I prefer strawberry.
tropical. Strawberry. Oh, there is a strawberry.
Oh, there you go.
Hey, he knows his Y food. This should hopefully give him the power to turn over the engine. If it's turned over, we've made progress. If it does spin and everything now. Oh, you're trying it already?
Yeah, trying it.
Got them. Inside that, there's 26 vitamins and minerals. It's high in fibre, high in protein, it's lactose free, it's gluten free, and there's no added sugar.
Tastes a bit like milkshake, doesn't it?
Yeah, it is actually a milkshake with 500 calories in here, which would actually replace your meal for the day. It's full of all your goodness. You can have it for breakfast, lunch, or even dinner if you fancy it.
Ready? No, we need another sip.
Good thing about Y Food as well, they do a vegan option, and the bottles is turning over. Yes!
How easy!
Are 100% recyclable as well. And if you guys wanted to try one for yourself and you want a meal replacement rather than having fast food because you're constantly on the go like me, you can do with the link in the description. And underneath me right now, there's a banner where you use a discount code as well, where you can get discount on Taster Pack 4. Go and try the fruity, it's summer. The engine turns, the Y Food did it. Next job. Okay, next on is the cylinder heads, right and left. But to time this engine up, we need to know top dead center of cylinder number 1, which is this cylinder here. Top dead center being when the piston is at the highest point, and then we time the engine up based on that. Now to find this, we've got a DTI gauge here, and we're gonna turn the crank over and make sure we get this absolutely bang on TDC. The engine's going to have a little bit of float, which means the piston is going to be at the top, even when we're turning it sometimes. So we've got to make sure we're bang on that. So this is how we're going to do it. First, my dad's going to turn the engine clockwise, and once this piston gets to the highest point, it will give me the highest reading on the DTI gauge. I'm then going to mark it on our contraption that we've built here on the flywheel side. Then my dad's going to go back, turn the engine anti-clockwise, and as soon as it hits that same reading as before, I'm going to make another mark on our contraption. The top dead center will be between those two marks, which I've done with a really thick pen. I've not helped myself, but there's not much float in the engine, so boom. Time for the cylinder heads. Of course, you can't put the cylinder heads on without the head gasket. So on goes a brand new head gasket, both sides. I put the washers onto a screwdriver first, which helps me slide the washer over the stud. And I do the same for the nuts as well. Two heads on, head bolts on, or head nuts on. You know it's serious when the glasses come out. Now the procedure to tighten the head nuts is 60 Newton meters. And once that's done, you then go back and turn them an extra 90 degrees. And this has to be done from the middle, working outwards. And it is really important that we get this right. That extra 90 degrees on the 60 Newton meters of torque made these head bolts pretty tight. After that, I can then put in the valve lifters. I hope all of you guys watching are managing to follow along, because this is as hard for me to explain as it is for me to do. This is the second engine I've ever rebuilt. And now with the cylinder heads and the camshafts on, we can begin to start thinking about the timing of the engine. We've got it wrong. So we thought piston number 1 was here, then it worked all the way down, but we read the manual upside down, and piston number 1 is all the way over here, which means we've got the timing for the top dead center thing wrong. So if we got that wrong and then we timed it up, it wouldn't have worked and it would have broke the engine. So now we're going to have to do piston number 1, which is here, work out what top dead center is on there, so when the piston's right at the top, and mark it here. Then we can begin timing the whole engine. Okay, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we're doing the same procedure as before, but this time the cylinder heads are on. And once we've found top dead center, we can now start adding all the chains, which keeps the bottom half of the engine in time with the top half of the engine. You can see we're using a photo that I took before we took it apart to put this thing back together. Just pure genius. This is a nightmare. There's a really complicated way of how to time this engine, and if I try and explain it, I'll lose myself. But in the most simple terms, we've got to keep this piston at top dead center, and then if you just come around here, the cams here, there's a little dot on the cam there and a little dot on the cam there. They've got to align. These dots have got to align with these little grooves here, both sides as well. And the way you adjust this top, so you undo these bolts here, you undo these bolts, and that allows you to turn the cam without moving the chain and the whole engine. This is so vital because this controls when the valves open to let fuel and air in and to let the exhaust gases out. And if they open and close at the wrong time, they could be hitting into the piston. So we've got to make sure that this is absolutely spot on. Okay, if we've done this right, it should turn over now. So let's check it all still stays in the right place. So
it should be coming up now.
Okay, keep coming. Slow, slow. Keep going. Yeah. Yeah, that's on. That's on. That's on. That's on. We're on and we're timed up and it works. It actually spins.
Can I go home now?
Vital stage is done and it's on to the final pieces. I'm about to put on the chain cover. I've put in a new seal on it. I've run a line of sealant around the edge and a new gasket on it as well. And I can knock it onto the side of the engine. There's then 2 cam variator sensors which sit inside the head. And after that, I can put on the rocker cover with a new gasket as well, of course. I'm happy with that. I can't put the other rocker cover on yet because we're missing a sensor over here, but For a non-professional and someone who was building cars in a restaurant car park 4 years ago, to put a Ferrari engine back together and now it actually turns over is a pretty solid achievement, I think. But now it's going to get a little harder, and of course we have an issue with the gearbox, but let me take it back. Inside here is the remains of the manual gearbox, the original manual gearbox. And let's be honest, unless you're Rain Man, this is not getting repaired. Like, I just can't, we don't know if there's gonna be missing parts out of this. We have no diagrams out of this. We've got all the gears, the selectors, the shafts. I mean, I have no experience with rebuilding gearboxes. Do you?
Bit, but not when they're in that state.
No, so we're willing to accept defeat on this until we saw the price of a gearbox from Ferrari. It's expensive. In my opinion, it's expensive. A brand new gearbox after VAT would cost you over £30,000. So buying one of them was out of the question. So second hand, you're looking at £15,000 for a gearbox, and they're an automatic one. Of course, we've got a gated manual box, but then we figured out that the gearbox that from the automatic and the manual are exactly the same. The only difference is the shifter. Well, we hope they're exactly the same. So I managed to get a second-hand gearbox for £4,000. But there's an issue. Here it is. This came off a fire-damaged Ferrari in Poland, and there's a hole in the side. We're hoping it hasn't caused any damage to the inside of it, but this is the mechanism for the F1 gearbox, the automatic one. It automatically selects the gears with hydraulic shifters. I think if we take this part off, and of course the broken part off, we can make this into a manual box, and we would have a manual box for £4,000, providing there's no damage here. Buying this box was a bit of a risk, but so was buying the car, and some risks pay off and others don't. I'm just hoping that this risk does. I hope there's no more damage inside that gearbox.
Doesn't look bad.
Oh, that's been in water.
Is it?
Oh, how did it get rusty?
Because it's been in water.
Oh. Maybe it isn't good.
Oh, it's the Titanic. The inside of the gearbox for some reason looked really wet, and not with oil, with water. So we had no choice but to start stripping this one apart to check for damage.
Oh, no.
That's the bearing melted.
Oh my god. Well, it's a good job we took it apart. Look at the bearing.
Oh my days.
So the fire's gone in there and caused destruction.
Absolute perished. Do you think the oil set on fire that was in the gearbox?
Oh, it could have. Because look, it's all black in here, isn't it?
Ah. Matt's
Good
facts.
call. Which ain't good news.
Not at all, is it really?
Not when you're trying to build a gearbox out, so it's set on fire.
Do these even turn?
Yeah, like that, all those bearings in here could look like that.
I think that was the car got it off.
That does not look good.
No. No.
Do you know when you're on eBay and you're looking for a gearbox and you've seen that?
Yeah, well, it's £4,000 as opposed to 15.
Yeah, it's £4,000 for a reason.
So now. Thank you. So now. Thank you. So now we have, well, two bad gearboxes really, and I don't even know where we're going to start or even finish with this. I've got to order loads of bearings for this, as I've got to order a lot of parts for the engine. But before I carry on with this, I mentioned at the start of the video that the French like to share with the Italian, and I'm about to find out whether that's true or not. When I picked up the Ferrari, it was missing a window regulator, and there was only a block of wood holding the window up, which was bad news. The good news was we have a regulator on this side, and the other good news is that we found the window regulator, but it's just missing a motor, and we've taken off the motor of this window regulator, as you can see here, and just checked the part numbers on the back, and it's a Bosch motor. for a brand new window motor for the Ferrari is £178. And the cheapest one I could find second-hand was 120. And that's the wrong side. But I copied the part number into eBay and then found out that that motor could be used on a well-known French car, in my opinion, called a Peugeot 406. And here we have the motor of the French car, which there is some slight differences. But generally, it looks pretty... Oh, in fact, that one is a little bit longer. It may work, it may not work. The connections are slightly different, but they're only a 2-pin connection and a 2-pin connection, so we could make that work. But this one could possibly work. It's not exactly the same, but it could work. But I guess we're gonna find that out in the next video. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace out.
What are you doing at the moment?
A stud.
What's on the stud?
A washer.
And what else is on there?
A nut, because
Hey!
like a drug there.